Nobody wakes up one day and forgets who they are. It doesn't happen overnight either. It happens quietly. Little by little, you stop listening to yourself. Little by little, you slowly become the version of yourself that feels the easiest to adapt. Until you catch yourself thinking, when did I become this person? Because people don't lose themselves in one moment. They lose themselves in small moments, small compromises, small silences, small decisions to choose acceptance over authenticity. And before they realize it, they've become someone they barely can recognize. So let's talk about how all this happens. For a lot of people, this begins with looking for validation. You stop looking inward for answers. You stop trusting your own judgment. You stop trusting your own choices. You stop trusting your own instincts. Your sense of self start moving into the hands of other people. You need people to tell you you're doing well before you feel successful. You need people to approve your choices before you're comfortable making them. You need people to validate your opinions before you're confident expressing them. You become less and less concerned with what you think, what you want, and what you believe. Instead, become more concerned with what everybody else thinks. The more your words depend on validation, the more disconnected you become from yourself. You start living according to places, approvals, according to acceptances, until one day everybody else's opinions become louder than your own. And that's where it starts to drift. You stop recognizing your own voice, not because you don't have one, but because you spend so long listening to everyone else's voice. And when you spend enough time listening to everyone else's voice, you stop using your own. So instead of becoming more of yourself, you start becoming whatever the room needs you to be. At first, it doesn't feel like you're losing yourself. It could feel like you're fitting in. It could feel like you're being flexible. It could feel like you're getting along with people. But you're a different person around different people. Around one group, you talk a certain way. Around another group, you talk differently. You exaggerate certain part of yourself here and you hide certain part of yourself there. You agree with things you don't believe in. You pretend to like things you don't even care about. Not because you're fake or not because you're a fake person or you're pretending to be someone else, but because you're afraid the real version of you might not be enough. So without realizing it, you begin editing yourself, softening your opinions, hiding your personality, changing your preferences, becoming smaller, becoming easier to accept, easier to agree with, easier to keep around. And if you do this long enough, it stops feeling like a choice. It becomes an automatic thing you do. You walk into a room and immediately start adjusting yourself. Not because anybody asks you to or even care, but because you spent so long believing acceptance has to be earned. Until one day you realize you spend so much time becoming acceptable to everyone else that you become unfamiliar to yourself. When you get so used changing yourself for acceptance, it becomes very easy to let trends define you. And before anyone misunderstands me, there is nothing wrong with trends. There is nothing wrong with seeing something online and liking it. There's nothing wrong with wanting better things for yourself. Problem starts when you can no longer tell the difference between what you really like and what everyone else like. Because a lot of people don't realize how much of their identity is being borrowed. One week everyone wants to dress a certain way, the next week everyone suddenly has the same personality, the same opinions, the same lifestyle goal, the same definition of success, the same idea of what a soft life should look like, the same idea of what a high value person should look like. And nobody stops to ask, do I even want this? Do I even like this? Does this actually align with who I am? Or have I just seen this so many times that it feels like I should do it? And that's easier to fall into than most people realize it. Because without noticing, you begin treating someone else's life like a blueprint for your own. Not because it reflects who you are, but because it seems to be working for everyone else. That's how borrowed identities are formed. When this happens, you're no longer discovering yourself, you're just collecting pieces of other people and calling it your identity. This doesn't just stop with strangers you see online. It starts showing up in your relationships. And I don't mean just romantic relationship. I mean friendship, family, people you care about. You start shrinking yourself so you don't lose people. You start adjusting your opinion so you don't create conflict. You start laughing at things that don't sit right with you just to keep the peace. You start saying yes when everything in you just wants to say no. You laugh things off even when they hurt. You tell yourself it's not worth the argument. I'll just let it go. I just want to keep the peace. And at first, this could feel like you're being matured. It could feel like you're becoming easy to love, easy to be around, easy to understand. But slowly, You're no longer fully present in your own life. You're constantly managing how other people feel about you while ignoring how you actually feel about yourself. And you might not even realize when you start disappearing inside relationships, because this doesn't happen in one big decision. It happens in small compromises, small silences, small betrayals of yourself, until you realize you've been so focused on keeping people close that you started leaving yourself behind. And the difficult part in all this is that people around you may never notice that this is happening, but you will notice, because every time you ignore your needs, your own voice becomes a little quieter. And eventually you stop asking, what do I need? You only ask, what will keep everyone else happy? And after you spend so much time looking outside yourself, being alone starts to feel unfamiliar. And I don't just mean being physically alone, I mean those moments when there's nothing demanding your attention. There are no conversations, no background noises, just you. For some people, this moment feels very uncomfortable. Not because silence is the problem, but because silence has a way of bringing you back to yourself. Think about a bottle that has been shaking all day. As long as it's moving, you can't really see what's inside. But the moment it becomes still, everything begins to settle. That's what silence does. It settles the noise. And when the noise settles, you start hearing the thoughts you've been avoiding, the emotions you've been pushing aside, the questions you've never slowed down long enough to ask. So what's the best thing to do in this situation? You try to reach for another distraction, another conversation, another notification, anything that keeps you from sitting with yourself. But the difficult thing here is, the more you avoid yourself, the less familiar you become to yourself. And maybe that's why being alone feels so unfamiliar. But for the first time in a long time, you're finally meeting the person you've been avoiding. Avoiding yourself and leaving yourself behind works hand in hand. Once you avoid yourself, you always leave yourself behind. And this does not happen in one big grand moment. It happens in quiet moments, in those simple moments, in those moments that you think are not important. In those moments you said yes when everything in you wanted to say no. In those moments you stayed silent when you needed to speak up. In those moments you ignored what you feel just to keep the peace. You convince yourself over time that it doesn't matter. One thing about this small moment is that they all have one thing in common. Every single one of them was a self-betrayal to yourself. We usually think betrayal is something another person does. Maybe someone lies to you or someone breaks your trust, lets you down. Yeah, all these are betrayals. But one of the deepest forms of betrayal is when you continuously abandon yourself. For every time you ignored your own voice, you teach yourself it doesn't matter. Every time you dismiss your own needs, you teach yourself they'll always come second. Over time, you stop trusting yourself, because trust isn't built by what you say, it's built by what you repeatedly do. So how do you trust someone who keeps ignoring you? How do you listen to someone you've spent years silencing? That's where sense of self begins to disappear. Not because someone took it away from you this time, but because you slowly stop protecting it. You stop defending your boundaries. You stop standing by your feelings. You stop believing your voice deserves to be heard. And maybe that's how people become strangers to themselves. Not through one life-changing moment, but through repeated moments of self-abandonment, until they don't know where they end and where everyone else's expectation begins. The person who deserves your apology the most isn't somebody else. It's you. For every time you left yourself behind just to be accepted. When you look back, it was never one big event. You didn't wake up one morning as someone completely different. It happened quietly. You stopped trusting your own voice. You become whoever the room needed. You borrowed pieces of other people. You kept choosing peace over honesty. You avoided the silence that might have brought you back to yourself. And somewhere along the way, you started leaving yourself behind. That's how people become strangers to themselves. Not because they changed. Obviously, change is part of life. The real danger is changing without asking. Am I becoming more of myself or less of myself? Because the goal was never to stay the same. The goal was to become more of who you really are. Not more acceptable, not more impressive, not more like everyone else, more like you. If this conversation helped you put words to something you've been feeling, I hope you don't leave it here. Sit with it. Ask yourself the hard questions. Notice the small moments where you stop choosing yourself. This is Inner Room, a place where we understand ourselves a little bit better. Thank you for spending this few minutes with me. Until the next conversation, keep making your way back to yourself. I'll see you in the Inner Room.